experts have identified diesel cars as being partly responsible for the worsening air quality and increasing level of fine dust in this country.
The Korean government tried to resolve these problems.
Get nauseous, I get dizzy.
Nitrogen oxides, vehicular emission and control.
Greetings, Sirsdin. I am Sakina. As what we can see from the previous clip, vehicular emission has affected both countries, Korea and India. Thus, this poster has highlighted the nitrogen oxides NOx vehicular emission and control. Is it that bad? Our poster has provided the QR code that the audience can scan for general and advanced information about nitrogen oxide emission.
The formation of aerosols is compounded by urban emissions, such as air pollution from industry and vehicular traffic.
Next slide will be present about introduction and facts by my team member Salahuddin.
Assalamualaikum and hi to Serustin. My name is Muhammad Salahuddin bin Hamzah from AS229-2B. I will start my part of the poster of EVT524 with the introduction. So, what is NOx, or known as nitrogen oxides? Nitrogen oxides are the colorless gas that are emitted from industrial process. Nitrogen oxides were also produced from manufacturing of nitric acid and the refining of petroleum. Nitrogen and oxygen atoms are the contents of nitrogen oxide molecules. Then, there's a few examples of nitrogen oxide gases in atmosphere, such as nitric oxide, nitrogen dioxide, and nitrous oxide. We will moving on to the next part, which is the few facts about nitrogen oxides, such as nitrogen oxides are one of the contributors of air pollution, like photochemical smokes and thinning the ozone layer, acid rain, and the greenhouse gases. Furthermore, in Europe, road transport accounts for more than 30% of nitrogen oxide emission. Then, did you know, worldwide, the engine combustion accounts for 70% of total energy use. Lastly, nitrous oxide are one of the ingredients for laughing gas, which was used as an anesthesia that can slow down your brain and body response.
Hi, it's me again. I'm Sakina. How does nitrogen oxide happens? It is happen under high pressure and temperature in engine and in complete combustion. Under high pressure and temperature in engine, nitrogen and oxygen atom in air reacts to form various nitrogen oxides, such as nitric oxides and nitrogen dioxides. Next is incomplete combustion. In real life, incomplete combustion produces pollutants of concern such as nitric oxide. When fuel combined with oxygen and nitrogen, it will produce carbon dioxide, water, carbon monoxide, hydrocarbons, nitric oxide, and particulate matter. From the previous slide, the example of nitrogen oxides gases in atmosphere has been discussed by my team member Salahuddin. But how does these gases such as nitrogen dioxides and nitric oxide forms? Nitrogen dioxides typically arises through the oxidation of nitric oxide by oxygen in air, where it is formed at very low temperature, which is 1000 Kelvin, where the chemical equation is NO plus O2 equals to NO2 plus O. Nitrogen dioxide also contributes to formation of ozone at ground level. This nitrogen dioxide is emitted from engine that will result to photochemical smoke. For the general public, the most prominent sources of nitrogen dioxide are from internal combustion engines burning fuels, while outdoors, nitrogen dioxide can be resulted from traffic such as motor vehicles. And lastly is how nitric oxides happen, which is NO, where it is most prominently in fuel. For industry, coal power plant contributed high nitric oxide formation, which is more than 50%. The sources is mostly from nitrogen in the air and also available in fuel, but in minimum amount. The pathway of nitric oxide formation is when it is in low temperature, nitrogen available as diatomic form of nitrogen, which is very stable and non-reactive. But when it is in high temperature, which is around 1000 Kelvin, this diatomic nitrogen will dissociate into monoatomic N2 available, which is not stable and reactive, where the chemical equation is N2 equals to 2N. Next slide regarding effect of nitrogen oxides and OX will be further discussed by my team member Noshafika. That's all from me, thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. I am Noshafika bin Sham, so I will explain about the bad effect of nitrous oxide. Pollutants are harmful to human, animals, and plant life if the concentration in the air is more than the particular limit. Nitrogen dioxide is an irritant gas which at high concentration can cause an inflammation to the areas. Nitrous oxide gases react, form smoke and acid rain, as well being the central to the formation of particles and the ground level ozone, both of which are associated with adverse health effects. These nitrogen oxides are pollutants and they can contribute to the formation of other air pollutants because a series of chemical reactions can occur in the atmosphere which involve nitrogen oxides. For example, they can form nitric acid, which one of the two main causes of acid rain. The acid rain, which can harm plant life including crops, alter the acidity of soil and thus affect the organism which can live there. And so, nitric acid has important environmental consequences, and this nitrogen dioxide also promotes the formation of ozone, which in the lower atmosphere is a form of air pollution which has negative consequences on human health. In addition, nitrogen oxides such as nitrogen dioxide are by themselves harmful air pollutants exposure and as a major role in asthma later in life. And once asthma has developed exposure to nitrogen oxide, which can increase the severity of asthma, and so therefore it is important to us to limit exposure to nitrogen oxides. If one lives near a roadway, especially a major roadway, one could be exposed to dangerous level of nitrogen oxide, which can have an adverse effect on health. Elevated levels of nitrogen oxide can cause damage to the human respiratory tract, respiratory infection, and asthma, while long-term exposure to high level of nitrogen dioxide can cause chronic lung disease. It may also affect the senses, for example by reducing a person's ability to smell and odor. Mostly, these pollutants are more effective for old age and to the illness. Next, runoff from fields is an indirect emission. Sources as heavy rain, especially after heavy fertilizer application, can lead to fertilizer and the nitrous oxide, which produced in the soil because of it winding up in storm and drain waterways as this water is exposed to air and evaporation occurs. This fertilizer and nitrous oxide is evaporated into the atmosphere. What started as an extra fertilizer become extra pollutants in the water and the atmosphere. Lastly, photochemical smoke is a mixture pollutants that form when nitrogen oxide and volatile organic compound react to sunlight, which creating a brown haze above the cities and also cause a blurry vision. That's all from me. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum and greetings to Dr. Rustin. My name is Nur Fadila binti Supardi and I will be presenting on the prevention and control method as well as the regulations and guidelines. For the prevention and control method, as the effects of vehicular nitrogen oxides on living things have been discussed previously, it has become vital to prevent and control its emission, especially when it becomes excessive. There are two most common ways, namely exhaust gas recirculation, also known as EGR, as well as catalytic converters. To start off, exhaust gas recirculation EGR addresses the problem of controlling nitrogen oxides which is inside the engine cylinder, at the point where nitrogen oxides form. It reduces the nitrogen oxides through lowering the concentration of oxygen in the combustion chamber and also through heat absorption. Having said that, the mechanism of an EGR system involves the recirculation of a portion of the exhaust gas to the combustion chamber, where it reacts with the fresh intake air. As a result, this lowers the oxygen content of the combustion mixture and increasing the water vapor content. With the increase of water vapor content, the effect will be observed in reduced peak combustion temperature. And because production of nitrogen oxides is dependent on a high peak temperature, this reduction will result in less nitrogen oxides production. Therefore, EGR is effective in reducing the amount of nitrogen oxides produced by the engine. However, EGR application is included into the design of only the majority of modern diesel automobiles. Next is catalytic converter. The inventor of this device was Eugene Haudry. He was the mechanical engineer from France, and he created catalytic converters in 1950 to remove the hazardous emissions produced by automobile exhausts. It was not widely known and used until in 1975, where the American production of cars started to introduce the use of catalytic converters widely. Ever since that, catalytic converters have been used religiously in all types of vehicles. A catalytic converter is a simple device that reduces pollutants produced by a vehicle by using fundamental redox reactions to convert the hazardous pollutants into a less hazardous form. It was studied that around 98% of the hazardous emissions produced by a vehicle engine are converted into less harmful gases. In the case of nitrogen oxides, it will start by removing the nitrogen atoms from nitrogen oxide molecules, which are the NO and NO2. Next, the free oxygen will form an oxygen gas molecule. And finally, the nitrogen atoms attached to the catalyst will react with each other, creating nitrogen gas, which is less harmful. Moving on to regulation and guidelines, to better control vehicular nitrogen oxide emissions, governments of many countries have established many regulation and guidelines for their citizens to follow. For example, National Ambient Air Quality Standards (NAAQS) was set to analyze 6 principal pollutants, including nitrogen dioxide, which is one of the forms of nitrogen oxides that can be harmful to public health and also environment. In Malaysia, the government have come up with the Malaysia Ambient Air Quality Standards 2013 (MAAQS 2013). This standard adopts 6 air pollutants criteria that include 5 existing air pollutants, which also include nitrogen dioxide. Then, the Environmental Quality Regulation 1996 of the emission controls from diesel engines as well as petrol engines. In conclusion, vehicular nitrogen oxide emissions have increased drastically over the past decades since the Industry of Revolutions, with road transport accounts for more than 30% of nitrogen oxide emission in Europe, and engine combustion accounts for 70% globally. This affects all life forms, from mankind and animals to microbes and plant life, as well as the Earth's atmosphere. As a result, nitrogen oxide emissions are rigorously regulated across the world, from combustion process modification to the establishment of allowable nitrogen oxide limits through regulations and guidelines. Hence, it is our responsibility to care for the environment and to one another. That is all from us. Thank you.